Hey everyone, this is Megan Hillier from Know Your Ancestors, and you're listening to the Know Your Ancestors podcast. Many of us have an innate desire to understand our roots, to know where we come from, and to understand the lives of our ancestors. On the show, I sit down with content creators and entrepreneurs to share some of the stories that I've uncovered and compiled about their own ancestors. Watch and listen as we discuss the traumatic and life-changing events of their close ancestors that helped shape who these guests are today. All right, welcome to the podcast today. I am here sitting with Kelsey Hansen, and she's been someone that I've known, like, I've probably known you for
Forever.
most of my life, but grew up in the same town, and I'm excited to talk to her and to be able to share some of her ancestry with her. But before we get started with that, Kelsey, can you just introduce yourself and talk a bit about you and your work and what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So I grew up in Canada and then I moved to the US for college and lived there for 20 years. I'm married, I have 4 kids, I homeschool my kids, and thought we would be down there forever. And a couple years ago, through some random circumstances, we moved back to Canada. So I'm currently in Saskatchewan, which I never thought I would say. But so we are living up here, loving it. I run some online businesses. I started out food blogging 13 years ago, and it just kind of transformed into some other things. And one of the things that I'm doing recently is some frequency sound healing, which I really love. So just helping people heal and feel better. And yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, you've always been kind of into, I feel like there's people that are into like growing themselves, becoming better versions of themselves. I feel like that's something that you've kind of been interested in maybe your whole life, but from what I've seen in your online, what you share online and things, can you talk a bit about like why you care so much about that? Why you care about your health? Why do you care about mental health? Why you care about, kind of growing yourself as a person?
Yeah. Well, because I grew up a very shy child. I think I was told I was shy from a
Me too.
very young age. I know you relate to that. So we live into those stories. I just remember hearing that a lot as a child. And so I always just felt I was that person and didn't like to do public speaking and didn't blah, blah, blah. So fast forward, I'm married. I have 4 young kids, 6 and under, and financially we needed a little help. We had student loan debt and we're just getting by as little young married with tiny babies. And I felt like in my gut, like I could do something to help with that and I could contribute, but it would mean like a lot of uncomfortable things for me because I was that quiet, shy, like had that story in my head. And so I got into online business in the social marketing space and put myself out there. And then I saw some success and I just kept putting myself out there. And then I realized if I wanted to keep growing and keep developing an online business and being successful in that space, I had to grow as a person. Like I couldn't stay who I thought I was. So I did. I started reading books. I started putting myself in circles with people who were way more successful and had a better mindset than I did. And I started learning from mentors and I found Bob Proctor and learned under him for years and met him in person and just shifted where I was spending my time and energy and who I was spending it with and just got into that growth mindset. And it's been a wild ride, but it's important to me because the more I did it, the more I saw the results of that and saw how it shifted everything in my life, my marriage and my kids and my parenting in every aspect and our finances, definitely. But I just like that's motivating to keep
Mm.
going because you see how the ripple effects kind of carry out. So it's important to me as a mom to keep growing and to show my kids that because they're going to go out in the world too and affect other people. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think seeing that power that you can actually change your
Yeah.
circumstance, you can actually change what your life is like. I think so many of us just like let life happen to them, and this is just how things are. And
Yeah.
it's powerful when you tap into that, you know, I can actually change,
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah. That's like one of my favorite quotes is something about that. It's like most people tiptoe their way through life trying to make it safely to death. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that just hits me, right? I'm like, no, I want to live, I want to thrive, and I want other people around me to thrive. So I have to
Mm-hmm.
take action and shift that because I didn't grow up with money and I didn't grow up thinking that I could be this successful entrepreneur with, an online presence. I didn't think any of that. So I had to do it
Mm-hmm.
myself.
Mm-hmm. So growing up, like you said, did you feel any of that possibility? Like, did your parents raise you to think like you could do whatever you wanted? Your
They,
grandparents, like, did you
they
feel any of that?
did. My parents did. My dad, especially. I didn't know we didn't have money till I was married. I was like, oh, oh, we didn't have money. Like I grew up thinking that possibility was out there. And my dad really did drill that into me that like, why not you? That's kind of like our little phrase that we have together. Why not you? Like why couldn't you do that? And I think because he had some regrets of, just kind of accepting a certain type of life and not going after what he really wanted. He did drill that into me, definitely. And I'm so grateful for that because I didn't realize that, it wasn't a lack mentality. I grew up thinking everything was great and like I could
Mm-hmm.
do it, sky's the limit. So I did have that, but still when you're like have all these like inner inner like feel it limitations and like think that you're shy and think that it's like a
Mm-hmm.
battle. So I had to choose to fight the battle. I had to choose to overcome it.
Yeah, take that scary step.
Yep.
So growing up, did you know much about your grandparents? Like, were you close to
Yes.
one
Yeah.
over the other or both or
Yeah, we grew up really close. We lived in the same small town as my dad's parents and most of his siblings. So we would go to my grandparents' house every Sunday night, and every holiday we had big meals and all of that. My mom's parents, my grandpa on my maternal side, he died when I was 11. And that was really shocking. He was 63 and he had a massive heart attack, and it was very sudden and very tragic. But we were very close to that side of the family too. They lived about an hour away. We did family reunions twice a year with them. Like I knew both sides of my family, cousins, grandparents, aunts and uncles very well growing up,
Mhm.
for sure.
Cool. Well, that's really lucky.
Yeah.
Did you know much? We're going to be talking about one of your great grandmothers. Did you know much about her
Yeah,
as,
I knew
yeah?
her. That's why I kind of chose her because as a child, I was exposed to her. She was in a home in our hometown. She didn't grow up there, but she ended up there. I don't even know how. I should ask my mom that. But she was living in this manor in our hometown. So when I was probably she also died when I was 11. So like 8, 9, 9, 10, I would say, like we would go visit her. I called her Granny Rose, and we would go visit her. And I remember like little things, like she crocheted like pillows, and she always had like Viva Puff cookies, and she smelled like smoke. She was a smoker. Like I remember her as a person,
Mhm.
definitely, but I know she had a hard life, and I know that a lot of things happened to her, and I just have always been curious because I did like know her as this old lady.
Right.
I'm like, what happened? Like, how did
Hmm.
you get there? I've always been kind of drawn to her and curious about that, especially too because she lived in Saskatchewan and now I'm living here, and I'm like, there's like these connections. I've been like trying to find like graves and stuff, so I'm excited.
Hmm. Oh, cool. Yeah. So this is your maternal, is it your maternal line? Because it's your mom's
Yep.
mother, right? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I am going to start sharing about her life with you, what I was able to find out. So let me just pull that up here. All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
That picture? Okay. So this is your great grandmother here in the middle with her mother. So here's your great grandmother, Luella Andrina Larson. She was born on September 13th, 1909, in Leonard, North Dakota. So Luella was the fifth of six children born to Lawrence and Christine Larson. When she was born, she had 3 older brothers, aged 11, 8, 5, and then an older sister who was almost 3 years old. And her father was a farmer. So I found this land patent, which is for land for a Lawrence G. Larson in North Dakota. And the location of where it is matches where they lived in the 1900 census and the birthplace of Leonard, where your great grandmother was born. So I'm pretty sure this is actually their land. So it says he had this land on the southeast quarter of section 28 in township 109 north of range 52 west of the 5th principal meridian in North Dakota. So I looked up where that is. So I found where that is here, just like a little bit southwest of Fargo. They had 160 acres there. The land patent was granted in 1905, but they likely were living on that homestead for a few years before that patent was finalized. But then I zoomed in here. This is their parcel of land here, just like out in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota. So I'm not sure if there's still any homestead there, any house still on that property. I don't really see anything, but that would be where their land was.
Oh my gosh.
So here it is, kind of in relation to Fargo. And here's Leonard that she lists her birthplace as. That's probably just like the community that they would have gone to get supplies, groceries. I'm not sure. But yeah. So I was curious, like how populated was North Dakota in 1909 when she was born? How many people were there? Was it rural? Like what would have been like in North Dakota? So here's the census information from 1910 for North Dakota. So it says the total population was 577,000 people, which seems like kind of a lot
Yeah.
for North Dakota. But I guess it is quite a large state. And you can see that most of the population, so it says 89% of the population lived in rural territory. So 17% of that lived in cities and towns, and then 72% were just other rural places. So even smaller than like villages and towns, less than 2,500 people, most of them just lived on the land. It looks like 72% of the people. So that was definitely them. They lived just on 160 acres out in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota. They lived there for at least 10 years. They were there in the 1900 census and possibly a bit more before that too. So what do you think their life might have been like? Luella's family as farmers in the middle of North Dakota, very rurally.
Cold.
Um, cold, yes.
You know what's wild is I've been to Fargo twice since we've lived here. I'm like, are you joking? I'm like, I'm gonna drive down there. Like, that's
Yeah.
insane. I never thought I would even be familiar with that area, but
Mm-hmm.
that's
Well,
really cool.
I think you'll be familiar with a few more areas that we're going to show. But so when Luella was 2 years old, her family immigrated to Canada from the United States. So on February 10th, 1912, they crossed the border in Emerson, Manitoba, with plans to go to Battleford. So you can see here's L.G. Larson, and then Mrs. Larson, Carl, Roy, Gus or Gustav, Lily, and then Luella was the youngest. She was 2 years old. So they were coming from Crookston, Minnesota. And what does that one say? Oh, that was just the train. And then from North Dakota to Battleford, they had $250 when they crossed the border there. So I was curious, like, why would this family come from North Dakota all the way up to Battleford, Saskatchewan?
Yeah.
But Saskatchewan was just recruiting people to immigrate, to settle their land, to farm their land. A few decades earlier, they had been granted land from the indigenous people there, probably pretty much took their land, but they and they started recruiting, getting people from Europe to come over, but they also sought out people in the United States to come. They really wanted experienced farmers from the United States to come up to Saskatchewan so they would actually have success farming the land. Saskatchewan land is probably pretty similar to North Dakota. And so that's likely why they came, either free land or very cheap land. And because of their experience with farming, they would have been sought out to do that. During the period of 1905 to 1923, 332,000 immigrants arrived in Saskatchewan from the United States. So there's quite a few. So the year that they came, 1911 and 1912, like 46,000 immigrants from the United States came to Saskatchewan.
Wow.
So a booming place, I guess, in the early 1900s there.
Yeah.
So from Emerson to Battleford is about 1,000 kilometers that they would have traveled by train. And then I found the train maps to see like the route that they would have taken. So from Crookston, where they said they came from to Emerson, this is Crookston. They would have taken this train up here to Emerson and then up to Winnipeg. And then from Winnipeg here, I don't know if you can see that, they would have traveled to Regina and then up to Battleford is right here.
Hmm.
And the train ends there. So this was quite the journey for this family. They lived near Leonard, right? So they would have gone to Crookston and then they probably likely went to Fargo and then took a train from Fargo up to Crookston. And then here I mapped out their whole little journey here. So from Leonard to Fargo was 40 miles, then 70 miles to Crookston, 100 miles to the border to Emerson, 70 miles to Winnipeg, then 350 miles to Regina, and then 250 miles up to North Battleford. So
Holy.
about 880 miles would have been this trek, mostly by train. And I'm not sure how long it would have taken, but probably a couple days with stops along the way. I'm not sure exactly how that would have gone for them, but they arrived at the border with $250 and were ready to start a new life in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
So here is what the rail yard in North Battleford looked like in 1910. So they would have come just a couple years later. The land there was likely similar to their farmland in North Dakota, but I don't think any of their other family came with them. None of Luella's father's family, they all ended up settling in Oregon. And her mother's family, I think she was one of only two other siblings. And I don't think the other one came. So like they were all alone, went up to Saskatchewan there. And I'm not sure exactly what that would have been like for them, but what do you think that might have felt like you yourself as someone who has moved and had to start new somewhere, right? What do you think that would have felt like for them and their family arriving in the winter of 1912? Like, did they have a house? Did they have to build a house? They had four young children. What do you think that might have been like?
So isolating. I just feel like lonely. Like there's grief, right? That comes with like making those big decisions. Like my little family has made several of those big decisions. And we have people, we live in a city with a neighborhood and people all around us, but it's still like so isolating to leave everything you are used to and everything you know. I can't even imagine like showing
Yeah.
up in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. That's how I felt. Like,
Yeah, I know.
but I
I
had a
know.
house.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm not sure if they would have had to, what did they live in when they first got, I don't know. But that would have been quite the experience for them. So in 1915, so about 3 years later, after they arrived in Saskatchewan, Luella's father enlisted in the Canadian Army to serve in World War I. So here, Luella would have been 6 years old, and her youngest sister was almost three. So they had two more daughters, no, one more daughter after they came to Saskatchewan. Luella's oldest brother would have been 17. So her three oldest brothers would have likely helped out with the farm and, made sure that they could support themselves while their father was gone to war. You can see on this enlistment record his physical description. So this was when he was 42. He was 5'7". His girth, I guess, is that like his chest? It was
Yeah.
35 and a half inches. He had a dark complexion, hazel eyes, dark brown hair, and they were Lutheran.
Yeah.
And he has a mole on the back between his shoulder blades. So
Wow.
I thought that was interesting.
That is cool.
So by August of the next year in 1916, he started getting sick while he was in France. He was admitted to the hospital in London and eventually was discharged from the army in 1917. So you can see his condition here. It says complains of weakness, shortness of breath, pain in the left side of his chest. Examination shows there is marked tenderness along his nerves, general debility, other systems normal, no evidence of chronic nephritis. Not even sure what that is, but so here it tells what the supposed cause was of his illness. Can you read what that says? I don't know if you can see that.
I have to move us. Had to lay in shell hole of water up to his neck for 18 hours. What?
Yeah.
I feel like I
So
know nothing. This is like the coolest thing ever.
yeah, so supposedly that's what he credited his illness to coming from, was laying in a shell hole of water up to his neck for 18 hours. Can you imagine? Like,
Oh,
yeah. So they tried to treat him, nothing was working, and they decided he was permanently disabled and unable to continue serving in the war. Said, to what extent will it prevent his earning a full livelihood? It says 30%. So they assumed he would be
all
30% less effective or less able
right.
to work. So he was sent home. It took like almost a year, I think, for him to be discharged. So he would have been in hospital trying to figure out, what they could do for him. But what do you think that might have been like for his family or for him? Like,
I'm just thinking mostly of her being that little, right? With that kind of like stress in the house,
mhm,
right? Like I feel an energy. And so I'm like, oh, what was that tiny home and this tiny girl taking on and
yeah.
feeling like our kids are so affected by us and just thinking about her mom and oh my goodness.
Mhm,
I didn't even know he went to war. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
hmm,
So this is a little clip from a eulogy that I think it was your uncle, maybe Keith Tolman,
my
gave
grandpa,
at
my grandpa.
your grandpa. Okay, gave at Luella's funeral. So I'm going to share a few of those clips for the rest of the slides. But he said, life for her was far from easy. Times were hard and money was scarce, sometimes non existent. At age 7, she was sent to live with an English nurse, where she remained until age 12. When the nurse had to return to England, she went to live on a farm with her eldest brother, Carl, and his wife. She lived there for 3 years. Her formal education ended at grade 4. So that 7 to 12, when she lived with this English nurse, that like kind of coincides with when her father would have been gone to war. So I'm not sure if that
Yeah.
was why. I'm not I'm not sure, but I just thought that was interesting that that would have been about the age that she was living with this English nurse, which I'm not sure
Hmm.
why she would, but thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So by 1921, 4 years after her father was discharged from serving in the war back home, they were living in North Battleford on a farm. Her father was a farmer again. They had 5 children living at home now. Their oldest son he might have been married by now, had his own family. And Luella was now 11 years old. Here you can see Luella is 11. They lived gave the section of land that they lived in Medstead, which is, I think, just near Battleford.
Yeah.
And they naturalized in 1915, which I attempted to look for a naturalization record, but you have to like prove that you're actually related to them and pay $75, and it can take up to a year. So if you want to do
Oh.
that, you could, but I don't know if you would even find any information that's helpful. But in any case, they naturalized in 1915, which would have been just before he enlisted in the army. So here's another blurb from that eulogy, and it says that Luella got married. She married Jim Rose of Medstead, Saskatchewan on May 1st, 1929. And they ran a livery stable and dray service. So I looked up what a livery stable is, and it is like a privately owned and opened up stable for people to keep their horses, and they would pay like a weekly or monthly fee. And then a dray service is like a delivery service, kind of like with a horse and
Mhm.
wagon. So they would have transported goods for people. When they got married, Luella was 19 and her husband was 38. So there's quite an age gap there. It seems like they likely did not have a ton of money kind of doing this. It says when their horses all died of sleeping sickness, they pulled up stakes and moved to Green Lake in northern Saskatchewan, where they farmed for a few years. So here's a few pictures that were on Family Search of them. So here's James and Luella. And this is, I think it was James's cousin or something, uncle. I can't remember. Another relative. And then this is the description of this picture says this is on their wedding day. So here's James and Luella on their wedding day. And then here they are in the 1931 census. So they had been married for about 2 years and they had one daughter. It says Mary Jane. James's occupation was listed as livery barn, but then crossed out and says stable keeper, which is kind of the same thing. So I'm not sure why it crossed out. And he worked on his own account. So it was his own business. This is where they would have recorded his income for the year, which is just blank.
Okay.
That could have been that he just didn't report it, or they just kind of lived off what they got, right? Like they just survived on what they were getting. So they were living in the Medstead village in Saskatchewan, and their home that they owned was worth $600. That's what this $600 is. They owned it, which I looked up with inflation what that would be today, and it's about $11,000. So probably not the nicest home on the street. But who knows if that inflation is correct anyways, or what that even means. But James was listed as being 36 years old and Luella 21, which James would have actually been 40 years old. But maybe he wanted to not look twice the age of his wife.
Huh.
And then here's another picture of Luella here. And these are likely some of her kids, and then her mother, Christine, here. So Luella and James ended up having 7 children. I couldn't look into much of their lives because they were born somewhat recently, and because of privacy laws, you can't access records, but I think some of them are still living.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is your grandmother still living?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they had 7 children, and I'm sure that was a rough life up there in northern, well, I guess it's not northern, middle Saskatchewan. So here's the 1931 census for Luella's mother, Christine. According to this, she was a widow. So Luella's father would have passed away by 1931. She was 60 years old, and her daughter Lillian and Lillian's husband and their 4 children were living with her on the same land that they were living in the 1921 census. So the same farm. Likely Lillian's husband just took over working on the farm in that land. So on Family Search, it says that Luella's father, Lawrence, died in 1946, which if Christine was a widow in 1931, that wouldn't really be possible. But here's his headstone, which I can kind of see why they made on a 4. It does even kind of look like a 4, but it could be a 2. I'm not sure. So I don't know exactly why there's that discrepancy, but I tried locating a death record, but I couldn't for him in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan records are not easy to locate, but you might be able to ask your mom and say, like, why does it say that she's a widow in 1931, but
Yeah,
says that he died in 1946? So I'm not sure about that, but maybe the headstone's wrong, or maybe that is a 2. I don't know.
I know. I'm like,
Kind of
it
hard to see.
looked like a 2 at first to me, but then when you said 4, I'm
I
like,
know. But 26 would make more sense.
and where is
But
it?
I'm
Where
not
is
sure.
he buried?
In Medstead.
Okay, I'm like, I'll
Medstead.
just go there.
So you could go there.
Yeah.
Go check it out. Let me know.
Okay.
Yeah. So well, let me just go back. So if it was in 1926, then Luella would have been only 17 when her dad passed away. So again, I'm not sure what happened there. Here's another clip from her that I think your grandpa spoke at her funeral, but this says in 1939, so they would have been married for about 10 years, they moved to the village of Green Lake where they bought a trading post. They made their living buying furs and berries from the Métis. Jim became known as the Rabbit King. Luella was kept busy raising 7 children and baking bread for sale in the store. She also acted as nurse when the need arose, which was frequent. Then in 1943, they moved to Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, where they ran a cafe for 2 years. And from there, they moved to Kelowna, BC. So, seems like they just kind of moved where things had to go to make ends meet. So in 1939, so here's North Battleford or Medstead, where they were around there. And then they had moved to Green Lake. And then after there, they moved to Meadow Lake. And then here is this picture is on Family Search of their cafe. It says it was in Green Lake, Saskatchewan, and that their trading post was located to the right of this building. So I'm not sure what year this was taken, but I think it does kind of show what their situation might have been like. Probably not the most wealthy family in town. So then it says that they moved to Kelowna, which is quite a distance. You can see like 1,200 kilometers. They probably took a train over to Kelowna, but maybe you can find out more about that from your mom because wasn't able to find much information about that. They did have one daughter who died at just over a year old, Shirley Rose. I'm not sure how she would have died. Again, I tried to locate a death record for her, but I couldn't find one. But she died in February of 1943 and would have just been just barely over a year old. I think she was their youngest, or actually, I don't know if she's their youngest because I don't know how old all her kids were.
Yeah, my grandma remembers that.
Oh, really?
Remembers her dying, and it like shook everything up for them. Like it was bad. Like she told me one time, like she remembers the screams like of her mom when baby Shirley died. Yeah, so sad.
Does she say what happened or what?
She did, and now that you're asking, I can't remember. But I'm gonna ask my mom about that because we were recently talking about it because we found her little gravestone here in Saskatchewan. So like me and my mom are like, baby, cool. See, like baby Shirley. So yeah, sad.
Wow. Yeah, would have been really sad. So at some point they moved to Bearberry, Alberta. Here is your great grandfather, likely at their home. I'm guessing this photo is on Family Search, and this was in around 1962. Is what they wrote there. So Bearberry, I had never heard of this place, but it is just between Calgary and Red Deer, like closer to the mountains. This is their land that they had in Bearberry. And this is their section of land. So I was able to find that actually on his death record that I got. But there's this curved little road, and there is a little house there with like another building. So that could have been where their land was. I'm not sure. I mean, where their home was. I'm not sure, but they had that whole quarter section there. So here is your great grandfather's death record. In November 1963, he passed away at the age of 72 from a coronary occlusion. So like a heart attack, like that would have caused a heart attack from atherosclerosis. So like build up on his arteries for 3 years. So he was 72. They had been married for 34 years, and Luella was 54 at the time that he passed away.
Yeah, and they were not living together. Like she was not.
Oh, really?
No, for like a long time. Like after the death of that baby, I'm pretty sure. I don't even know if she went to Kelowna with him. Like that's where I'm like, something happened there.
Okay.
Yeah, he was living in that place alone. I'm pretty positive.
Oh, interesting.
Like to the woods.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, that adds another layer of.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Well, here is Luella's headstone. So she passed away in 1994. From her obituary, it says that she came to Arrowwood, which one of her daughters was living there, so maybe she lived with her. I'm not sure. She came to there in the late 1960s, where she resided until moving to Vulcan in September 1992. And her daughter was living in Arrowwood, so she might have It's like a little tiny village between Calgary and Brooks, but you can probably ask your mom more about all of that. But she died on the 18th of February, 1994, at the age of 84. And then here's one last little um, part from that eulogy where your grandpa said, Luella was always happiest when she was hard at work. She loved to travel and thoroughly enjoyed seeing new country. She had a great sense of humor and was always telling funny stories. In all the problems of life, she never lost her ability to laugh. She was extremely generous to a fault, literally giving the shirt off her back if she thought you needed it or even wanted it. So this is her, and that's her three daughters, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's my grandma in the front on the left.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. All right. Well, that's what I have to share with you, Kelsey.
Aw.
So, how are you feeling now that you've learned a bit more about the life of your great grandmother? Maybe still missing some questions in the middle of her
Yeah, there is.
later
I'm like,
life, but
yeah, there's a lot. I Now I'm like determined to find out. And I know that she's been like my grandma, she's 90, she'll be 91 next month. And she does have a pretty good memory. So I know a lot has been recorded of her life from my mom and my aunts and stuff. So now I'm just curious to like learn what they've found out. But the early stuff, like where she came from, her family, her parents, all of that, I didn't know any of that.
Mhm.
That's really cool, especially like the connection to places I've been. Like I
Right.
driven right by there and didn't know. And then now being in Saskatchewan of all places, I never thought I
Mhm.
would end up. I'm like, I have like an opportunity to actually go and see some of those places, and that would be really cool.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 Well, I think it's interesting when we like can actually look at those little clues about our ancestors, like even just seeing where their land was to kind of get a sense of what it might have been like helps us to get a better understanding of who they are, who they were, what experiences might have happened, like living on some little farmhouse in the middle of
Yeah.
Saskatchewan. Like,
Yeah, when
yeah.
everything was just starting, because I know that they built that trading post and like people were coming through, like that was like the beginning of like
Hmm.
people being up in that area in, I mean, it's not northern Saskatchewan, but it's like that country is
Yeah.
wild. It's
It's about as north as people are
yes,
almost. But
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So I know that like all the traders that came through there, like it was just like log
Mhm.
roads and like
Yeah.
they built that little trading post and cafe. And then when that baby died, I think that's when they
Things
shifted and
changed.
a
Yeah.
lot changed. So
Hmm. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, to take a drive.
Yeah. Now that you've learned a bit more about her, do you feel any different sort of connection to her or feel kind of how you can honor her in your own life now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just more determined, I guess. So I lost my dad a year ago, and
Hmm.
ever since then, I've just felt this like burning desire to learn about these people. Like, where did I come from? Like, I knew my grandparents, I knew of their parents, I know, the family tree, I know the names and the, Denmark and
Hmm.
like the places, but it's like stories like it's like the little things that I'm like, okay, but who am I? Like, who were they? Not just a name on a tree. So yeah, learning that is just giving me more of that desire. I'm like, okay, like now I want more. Like, kind of
Hmm.
greedy. I'm like, who else can I learn about? Put all the pieces together that made my grandparents that I knew really well, that made them who they are, that made my
Right.
parents who they are, right? Like,
Hmm.
I love it. It's cool. Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kelsey, for being here.
Of
How
course.
can people connect with you and get to know more about what you're doing in the world?
Mostly Instagram.
Mhm.
Instagram is the place I hang out, I guess. I tried to avoid it, but I'm there now. My handle is Simple Life by Kels, and that's where you can
Yeah.
find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll put that link in the show notes. And Thanks again, Kelsey, for coming on and for letting me share a bit more about your great-grandmother with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for watching or listening to the podcast today. If you want to start learning about your own ancestors, you can get my free mini class called 3 Steps to Start Knowing Your Ancestors. It comes with a workbook. It's super short, but has actionable steps that you can take to start knowing your own ancestors. Just go to knowyourancestors.co/3steps or click the link in the show notes to sign up. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time.